Thank you, Pastor Martin. I'd like to officially call the November 6th meeting of the Board of Supervisors to order and ask Supervisor Galgino to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have an agenda before us. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, we will proceed as presented. The first item on the agenda is our consent agenda, and I would ask the county administrator to please read that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. We have a lengthy consent agenda this morning, so I'll read these items. Under item A, the board will consider approval of the October 1st, 2024 AM and PM minutes. Under item B, the board will consider acceptance of a grant and appropriation of the funds in the amount of $25,000 for Culpeper Human Services. The grant is from the Path Foundation for operation of a warming shelter. Under item C, the board will consider acceptance of 2 donations and approval of a budget amendment in the total amount of $4,500 for the Sheriff's Office. The funds are to be used for the cadet program. Under item D, the board will consider acceptance of a donation and approval of a budget amendment in the amount of $2,000 for the Animal Services Department. LeBaron Rescue and Sanctuary donated these funds to be used for veterinary services. Under item E, the board will consider a budget amendment in the amount of $1,230 for the Animal Services Department. The funds are from the DMV from the sale of animal-friendly license plates in Culpeper County. Under item F, the board will consider approval of a CIP project transfer for the school system for the FY25 budget and appropriation of funds in the amount of $133,360.17 received from a school safety grant program. Under item G, the board will consider acceptance of a grant and approval of a budget amendment in the amount of $2,500 for the Parks and Recreation Department. The funds are from the Path Foundation for a special event. Under item H, the board will consider acceptance of a donation and a budget amendment in the amount of $7,074.01. The funds are from the Bobby Len Memorial Field of Interest Fund through the Northern Piedmont Community Foundation. Under item I, the board will consider acceptance of a donation and a budget amendment in the amount of $2,000 for Culpeper Human Services. The funds are from the Midday Lions Club to be used for the operation of the warming shelter. Under item J, the board will consider acceptance of a donation valued at $8,000 for the Sheriff's Office. Baker Bloodhounds has donated a bloodhound puppy. And under item K, the board will consider appropriation of funds in the amount of $251,600 to install a permeable paver parking lot and associated stormwater bioretention facility at the Carver Center. This project is funded by the NFWF and VCAP grants previously awarded and accepted by the board.
Thank you, Mr. Egerton. Is there a motion?
That's a very expensive bloodhound, but I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion is carried. Next item on the agenda is general county business. We have 2 items on general county business today. The first is the board will hear an update from a representative from All Points Broadband. Mr. Innes, would you like to come and address the board?
Good morning, members of the board. Thank you for this opportunity. Oh, good idea. Thank you for this opportunity to provide an update on the broadband project. As you all know, we've had a series of ups and downs in this project. Right now, we're on an upswing. I know over the course of the past few months, the county has renegotiated the agreement with All Points Broadband. I would say the position was firm, but certainly in good faith and with the interests of the folks who need broadband at the top of the list. So we took the marching orders from that renegotiated agreement, and we've been executing on that. Primarily, it's a shift from aerial fiber to underground. We had some very good news on Friday, which was after I finalized the presentation. The program that we're focusing on, a new program from the state that we discussed during our negotiation process, we applied for additional funding for undergrounding our fiber in October. Probably some kind of record for the state. We got approval for that on Friday. So within a couple of weeks after the application, we got approval for that program. Still need to work out the actual details, but very good news, keeping the project on track. Wanted to share the initial batch of customer communications that have gone out to 224 locations in the project. This is in Culpeper Service Area 6. These are the folks that are seeing construction outside of their house now. I want to put this together. 10% of them had already signed up and paid for service. Now we're at 15%, so pretty good response from these notifications. This was the first letter that went out. The next was an email to folks who had pre-registered already. And then we also sent a follow-up postcard. The remainder of Culpeper Area 6 will be getting these later this month in November as they see construction trucks going down their neighborhood as well. Wanted to touch on the significant progress of Dominion's middle mile construction. So up here we have a map. The green lines, those are already built. You've seen those trucks out there for the last year and a half. We have a work in progress up in the north section in turquoise. There's one section in pink, a little under 3 miles, still waiting on an easement agreement. Again, this is Dominion's middle mile. They build this in support of our last mile fiber. So we get an upstream internet connection, then it will connect to Dominion's middle mile fiber, and then down the line, All Points builds our last mile, and we connect to the homes. There are also a significant number of homes that will be served directly from an access point on the middle mile fiber. So later on, I have a slide where you can see our release to construction, and it overlaps very closely with the green lines here. Again, reminder of the areas that we are focused on, and this will make a lot more sense when I show the miles that we've already released to construction. So we had a big network cabinet. Construction is complete. This is at a property owner in Stevensburg. This is the primary internet connection for our network. So we get an internet signal from a company called Segra, connects to Dominion's middle mile. It goes into this cabinet. We re-amplify the light and then send it out through the rest of the county. So the middle mile section is complete. The power and the battery backup, everything is set on the cabinet. We had an issue with a pre-programmed device from Segra, and they're still working through that. We're meeting with them 3 times a day until it is done. As soon as that piece of hardware is fixed, the internet will be up in that cabinet and serving the customer that already has all of their equipment installed. So to reduce the risk of the utility pole make-ready process, which was the focus of this project for the last 2 years, we've transitioned the majority of our fiber to underground wherever the make-ready cost or the timing was excessive and either missed our budget or missed our timeline. The General Assembly knew this was coming. In the last session, they created a new program called the Virginia Make-Ready Initiative, or the Resiliency Fund. It's available to all broadband projects in the year that we were awarded our RADI grant. We knew this was coming. They opened the project in September. We worked with the county to become eligible for that. And then in October, we submitted our first request. Didn't know what the results would be. On Friday, we found out that both of our applications were approved. A huge win. So we released our miles to construction, put in our VDOT permits, hoping with fingers crossed that our October application would be approved, but we did that anyway. On next Thursday is the next round of submissions. We expect to get the rest of the Culpeper miles submitted to the state program. That picture on the right is a connection between All Points Network and the Dominion Middle Mile. There's it's what's called an H-frame that holds the circle of Dominion fiber. So if you see a pole with that, it's all over the county. That is Dominion's middle mile, and then the kind of the metal box in the middle is where we connect to our network. So we have 224 locations in our first round of construction. When I put this together, 10% have already signed up and paid their installation costs. Now we're at 15%. We're releasing miles to VDOT as fast as we can. Right now, we've released twice the number of miles or number of permits that they will approve at one time. So we're creating a backlog with VDOT. We are going to work with the county to increase that throughput. In other residencies, we've been able to submit a significantly higher number of VDOT permits at once. We have a constraint right now at about 6 or 8 permits, up to 2 miles per permit. As soon as we get those worked through and we increase the throughput, we're going to really flood VDOT with these. As noted, and as you all know, when we renegotiated our agreement, we agreed with the county that if we didn't deliver by October of 2025, all of those customers would receive a 50% discount if they were not able to sign up in February 2025. So right now, the red lines on here are Dominion's middle mile. The blue is our what's called Culp 6 path, so it builds off of Dominion's middle mile. Culp 3 is in purple. The 2 approvals for the Make Ready Resiliency Fund were Culp 6 and Culp 3. That's what we have on deck right now. The Culp 6 routes are being released to construction. The next round is going to be Culp 3, and then we'll circle around the rest of the county as there is capacity at VDOT. We're not going to wait for the Make Ready Resiliency Fund results. The constraint there is how many permits the VDOT residency will approve at one time. So when you see vendors, our primary vendor here is a company called Mastech. They've done a lot of work for Dominion. If you see Mastech crews out there, they're doing our work now. This is where you will see construction. So with that, I'd welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis. Are there any questions?
I have a couple, sir. So one, good to see that there is a cabinet, there's fiber being run, et cetera, so that's all great. Were there customers lit up as of October 31st?
No, sir.
Okay, and do you believe that the project will be substantially complete by the end of February of 2025?
I do, and we're going to need some help with the VDOT permits. That's our constraint right now.
Okay, that gets to a third question then. What can we do to help with VDOT permits?
So it's our first batch of permits with Warrenton residency.
Okay.
So we understand that we need to have them in a format that they approve. We need to show and demonstrate that our construction vendors can build to their specifications. I think after that is just asking for more resources for that residency to do this type of work.
Okay, so resources to approve permits at the Warrenton residency.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Other questions,
Yes,
comments?
please. So for the Culp 6, you say the routes are now being released for construction. So at what point do you believe that those routes will be complete and all the customers will be available for connectivity?
So that section in that is released to construction right now, we have 12 miles that are being built. They should be done at the end of next week. And that group of customers, the 224, will be able to sign up and have service. Probably within another 2 weeks after that, another 225-ish customers will have service. And then the following 2 weeks after that, the remaining sections of Culp 6.
Okay, so once being released from construction, approximately, you're saying 6 weeks, that should be complete for
Yes,
Culp 6.
But in about 2 weeks, the first batch of 222, they can all get their service, 224, they can all get their service before the rest of Culpeper 6.
Right, I realize that
Yeah.
it's kind of a progression. And then for Culp 3, once those are released from construction, how long do you think that it will take to complete that entire route?
They will go in about 2-week sections as well, and there's 4 individual sections. So if VDOT said, instead of 6 to 8 permits, you can have 12 to 16 permits, then we could do 2 areas at a time. But our constraint right now is the VDOT permits. So
But you believe you'll get the VDOT permits in enough time to get those, I mean, you're talking 4 months, or 2 months for Culp 3, so you need to have those permits in hand by mid-December to complete by February.
they are all going to be submitted to VDOT, if not this week, next week.
Okay. And how long have they been taking to approve them?
The ones in Culp 6, after we met the format that they wanted, it took a couple of weeks.
Okay.
But they don't want to have more than 6 or 8 open permits at a time.
Okay. And then for Culp 6 and Culp 3, what is the percentage of the total homes are located in those 2 areas?
They are roughly split about a sixth of the project.
So you're talking only a third, this is, what's on this page in color is only a third of the project?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And you're not going to be starting any of the other areas until these are completed?
We will start the other areas as soon as the VDOT permits are approved.
But yet you still believe that you could substantially complete the project by February of
I am
2025?
confident that VDOT will allocate the resources here to have enough open permits at the same time. The Mastech firm will bring in enough crews to build the miles. So yes, ma'am, we're gonna need help with the VDOT permits and the constraint there. But if we get there, go ahead to have more open permits at the same time, we can hit the February being substantially complete.
Okay, and there's no other areas that are working within Dominion's aerial that you guys are still doing aerial that you can complete while these underground are being constructed?
There's a small fraction of the blue lines that are aerial.
No, I mean outside these 2 regions.
We could, they just wouldn't be connected to, upstream internet.
Okay, so that still needs to be done for the other areas as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
The VDOT and the Dominion Make Ready is not a constraint on other areas outside of Culp 3 and Culp 6. The issue there is that we could build a couple of sections of fiber, but it would be on an island by itself and not connected to any other part of the network.
okay. Yeah, because my biggest concern is that we're focusing on, and I'm grateful for that because that's my district, but to the fact of the matter is if that's only a third of the people and we're spending the majority of our time on that, like I would like to see a timeline, a legitimate timeline of when we believe all of these different sections, because those are the calls we are getting. When is it coming to my area? When is it coming to my area? And we all have to say, we have no idea because they haven't told us. So having anything that will show that progression of a little more detail than say the blue will be done by whenever and the pink will be done and we don't know when the rest will be done, it's not adequate for us to be able to provide information to our constituents. So any additional information would be helpful.
So estimated timeline on the release to construction for the other areas. I can put that together. We're gonna probably at the same time ask for some help and meet with VDOT and explain the timeline to them and the implications of a 6 to 8 permit constraint.
Right, and that's for the underground lines. That's not for the aerial lines, right? You don't need VDOT permits for the aerial, do you?
Correct, but the aerial make-ready construction is too expensive and too time-consuming, so we're switching most of it to underground.
Okay. Even in the northern areas?
Even in the northern areas.
Okay.
When do you plan on applying for funds relative to the switch in the northern and western areas?
The next application date is next Thursday.
So do you have plans to submit for the northern and western areas next Thursday?
We are flooding the application with the rest of the Culpeper. So they open the application window once a month.
Yes.
And across the state, there's a cap of $7.5 million. And so we got to be strategic when we apply, but we think we can get the rest of the Culpeper applications submitted and be competitive enough to get those awarded on the November 14th cycle.
If they're awarded, or do you have a project plan and timeline relative to the other 5 areas not labeled 3 and 6? And if so, what is it?
Well, we're going to apply for the Make Ready Fund November 14th. We can submit all of the underground permits to VDOT right now. We know that they're not going to approve those.
Thank you.
So, so we will work with VDOT as well. That's what we do. So can we be assured then there's no other excuses other than resources that you need from VDOT?
So the VDOT resources is the main constraint we have right now. We know that related to that, there's a underground locating ticket system that has some constraints. We brought on a new director of government affairs, the chairman of the board across the state to manage that program. So we feel like we're good mitigating the risk of the underground locates, but the VDOT, that is a constraint that we don't have much leverage over.
So there's no other issues.
We got a construction firm, Mastech, that can bring in the crews. Constraint we have right now is the VDOT permits. That's it.
Yeah, so there's no other issues. Yes or no question?
Correct. There's no other issues.
Okay, thank you.
One final question. When you say substantial completion, can you further define substantial? Is that 80%?
I think it's 80% in our agreement.
Oh, gotcha. That's
There may be
okay.
someone at the end of the road who doesn't approve a private easement, and it takes a little bit longer to get down to their section of the area of the fiber service area.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I have one question.
Yes, sir.
We would like to help you with VDOT, and we'd like this to get moving for sure. So could you tell me what VDOT has changed since you put this plan together that is hindering you? Because obviously you thought they would do this quicker.
Yes. So in other residencies, we had significantly more open permits at the same time. And this is our first submission to the Warrenton residency.
So it's just a matter of how many they will do? Other residencies do more?
Yes. And maybe, we need to establish more of a track record. But the feedback we got was 6 to 8 permits. You can have up to 2 miles on a permit. So that's our constraint right now.
And that has been their policy for some time?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments?
Thank you for the update.
Thank you very much. Okay, next on the agenda, our treasurer, Missy White, will present the 2024 annual report to the board. Missy.
Good morning, everyone. To lower this down, I'm short. Happy to be here today to go over the 2024 Treasurer's Report. I don't know where the, do you know where the click? If any of you are like me, you probably stayed up a little later than normal last night, so I'll try to get through this as quick and painless as possible. A copy of the report has been provided to each of you and was also posted on board docs, so I'll just briefly go over the details of each section. Report number 1 references any real estate on the land books that has been found to be improperly placed or not ascertainable, meaning not collectible per se. This year, we did actually have 2 parcels that fit this criteria per the real estate assessor. Tax map number 6970 under the name of Martha Lightfoot was determined not to be a taxable parcel by the real estate assessor, so tax years 2021 through 2023 were abated by his office, and tax amounts for tax years 2017 through 2020 were written off by our office. And additionally, tax map number 18-1, under the name of Lucy Ficklin, was also determined to no longer exist by the real estate assessor. So tax years 2017 through 2019 were abated by his office, and tax amounts for tax years 2004 through 2016 were abated by our office. And reports number 2 and 3 kind of go together, and there are a lot of numbers that are probably too small to read for anyone in the audience, but they kind of go together in that they address the collection rates for both personal property and real estate. The details of these are on this page here. And in short, as you can see, for real estate, the overall collection rate for the 20-year period of 2004 through 2023 is staying steady at 99.88%. And as you know, real estate parcels that are more than 2 years delinquent are turned over to a collection attorney out of Fredericksburg. And in fiscal year 2024, the county received approximately $100,000 resulting from their collections. Under Report 3, which is the bottom half of this page, you will see the details for the personal property collection rate. And that collection rate over the 5-year tax period of 2019 through 2023 is an overall 96.26%. It should be noted here, though, that there is a personal property account included in these figures with a delinquent balance of approximately $2.5 million, which equals about 37% of the total delinquency. This business filed a request for an official review of their assessments in May of 2024, which puts an automatic stop on any collection efforts that our office can take. A response to the review was completed and sent to the legal counsel of this business in August, in which their response was to file an official notice of intent to appeal to the Virginia Department of Taxation. We have not been aware that any formal appeal has been made to the Department of Taxation as of yet, but this notice of intent does also halt any collection efforts by our office. However, we are currently seeking alternate legal actions or methods to collect this, so we are still working on it and are in hopes that it'll be resolved very quickly. So if those numbers are not included in delinquent amounts, the collection rate goes to 97.64%, which is more in line with the previous tax years. As well as real estate, personal property accounts that are delinquent more than 2 years are also assigned to a tax attorney, collection agency, and for fiscal year ending 2024, the county received $132,000 resulting from their collection efforts. I have to go backwards now. Report number 4 addresses tax bills that are under a certain dollar amount per the Code of Virginia where no bills are actually sent. And in Culpeper, we use the amount of $1 or less. And for this reporting period, 150 bills totaling $119.25 were not mailed, so thus far they were abated by our office. Similarly, report number 5 addresses any tax bills that are paid but not paid in full, and the treasurer determines that the cost of collecting these would cost more than the actual amount due, but fortunately we have nothing to report in report number 5. And in report number 6, we have a summary of any uncollected balances of previously billed personal property on vehicles that were owned by taxpayers who are now deceased and also meet others criteria by the Code of Virginia. And in this year, we have found 83 accounts totaling $26,861.85 that meet this criteria. So that wraps up everything that I'm required to report to you by the code. So I'm happy to take any questions or comments you might have.
Thank you. Any questions or comments?
Yes, you mentioned the amounts under $1 now. I thought historically we were using $5 as the amount.
It was that amount, and in 2022, our printer that prints our bills mistakenly sent out every bill, and in doing that, we realized that we had a lot of $3 bills that were actually getting paid, and it wasn't costing anything to mail them because typically those folks have other property, and the printer mails all those bills in the same envelope, so it really wasn't costing us anything to mail them. And in doing so, it also cleaned up a lot of trailers that people no longer have because they hadn't been getting a bill for them. So they weren't paying them and they didn't realize they were still being billed for them. So we have been able to clean up our tax roll a little bit because of that.
Well, I guess I appreciate the cleaning of the tax roll, but as one person who gets a $3 bill that no longer has a trailer that hadn't had time to call you and tell you, I'm not sure that's the best process.
Wow.
Because, I mean, yeah, you literally are like, okay, you got a bill for $3. Are you gonna go through the whole process to say that this trailer is 32 years old and of course it doesn't exist?
Yeah.
Or not?
Yeah.
So,
We do collect a lot of $3 bills, for sure.
oh, I pay, because it's cheaper than having to call.
The process is fairly easy. If you just contact the commissioner, she will help you out.
All right, thank you.
What's the percentage of citizens that have chosen to pay their real estate taxes by the month? Do you know?
I don't know the percentage off the top of my head, but I do know that we monthly are collecting on average about $28,000. So that's probably, I don't know. I don't know exactly how much that would be because the average varies per taxpayer. But I can get that for you.
Is that more work for staff as far as
It's
people paying by the month, or would it be wise to market it to let people know?
absolutely market it. Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
Is there anything we
absolutely.
can do to help there?
I try to put it in the Culpeper Quarterly as often as I can, and we did send it out with the tax bill the first year that we did it. We've talked about sending it out in the tax bills again, but no, anybody that you think would be interested, I would certainly welcome that. The work is minimal compared to the benefit that we're seeing.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is old business. We have one item of old business today. The board will consider appropriation of additional federal funds for the Greenhouse Road project at the airport. Mr. Egerton, would you introduce this?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I would call this item this morning a sort of a cleanup item. But to give you some background, the Greenhouse Road project is one at the airport that extends Greenhouse Road along the eastern side of the airport and opens up that side of the airport for future development. It also technically relieves an obstruction problem on Beverly Ford Road and is something that the FAA has wanted and something that's been on our airport layout plan for many years. This project has gone in fits and starts due to funding constraints. We've come at it a number of different ways over the years. It literally has been about a 5-year project that has morphed from being a 2-phase project to a 1-phase project and back and forth, et cetera. But without getting into the deep details, the bottom line is the road is nearly complete at this point. And over the years, the changes in funding in order to make this happen have occurred without necessarily the CIP keeping up with it. So what I bring to you today is the final funding formula for the road. It's on board docs in the form of a chart. It's actually good news for the county in that the CIP included $403,000 in local funds. Those have been reduced by about $150,000 so that we are going to have some money to return to our general fund as part of this. And the state funding, which was a large part of the road, has actually been reduced, but that reduction is offset by all the new federal funds we've been able to obtain. So the bottom line for the action this morning is that we are asking that the board accept and appropriate an additional $3,079,601.70 in federal funds for the Greenhouse Road project. And upon that action, we'll be able to close this out.
Thank you. Questions, discussion?
Make a motion to accept and appropriate the federal funding amount as presented.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is new business. We have 3 items in new business today. First item, the board will discuss and consider a request for financial assistance for the operation of the Culpeper Warming Shelter for 2024-2025. Mr. Hagerson, would you please lead us in this?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I'll kick it off. This is a request coming forward from Culpeper Human Services, who are in partnership with Encompass in order to make sure we do have a warming shelter in place again this year. The intent is to operate that from December 1st through March 31st. You might have noticed on the consent agenda there were 2 different donations to make this warming shelter happen, but the folks trying to get it set up are still in need of funding, and like they did last year, there's a request for $50,000. I believe a similar request will be going to the town in the near future, but with that, I'd like to ask Lisa Peacock to come up and discuss this and answer any of your questions.
Good morning. Thank you for having me here today. I would like to point out that I do have 2 other members of our committee here, Jim LaGraff and Cheryl Reinstrom from Encompass Community Supports. Since last year, the committee, and we do appreciate Encompass for last year, they did a wonderful job operating the warming shelter for 23-24. But this year we have a small committee of folks made up in the community: Pastor Dan Carlton, Pastor Brad Hales, of course Sarah Berry, who's our new DSS director, who's here today, and Christopher McGill with Culpeper Housing and Sheltering Services, as well as Andy Johnston from the Path Foundation, who's been we've been meeting on a pretty regular basis to talk about the operation of the shelter for this year. I did include a budget and hopefully showing you that we have lots of in-kind support, as well as the cash donations that we have collected so far of about $54,000. We just sent out a letter to the community making a request for additional support financially, and we're receiving some small donations that are coming in from the community. Primarily, the request is to help support us with having chaperones that will stay there overnight. That has been an issue, as you know. In the past, we've had volunteer force that did an exceptional job of operating the shelter, and since the pandemic, that volunteer force has not been available for us. People are reluctant to volunteer and stay overnight at the shelter, so really what we're going to be using the money for is mainly to provide the supervision that's needed overnight. I also want to just share with you that we are on the agenda for the Culpeper Town Council for December the 10th. We're going to be doing a presentation to the Finance Committee on November the 27th, and we're going to be requesting the same amount of funding from the Town Council that we're requesting from the Board of Supervisors. Last year, I don't believe that they support the work that we're doing, but I don't believe they made a financial contribution last year to the operation of the shelter. But we're hopeful this year that we will be able to convince them that they should assist with financial support for the warming shelter, because primarily the folks that we're serving, while they're Culpeper County residents, they're also primarily Culpeper Town residents that we're serving. So unless you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those.
I have a question, Lisa.
Sure.
So, for the public's information, I guess Encompass is Rapidan Community Services.
Yes, sir.
So, are they dissolving their responsibility for this program. I'm all about the heat shelter.
Right.
And a year and a half or two ago, I mean, I went to breakfast with Mr. LaGraff, and we had a very firm and forceful conversation in order, for coming from me, for him to consider taking over the program, which they did and did a good job. Now, are they dissolving their responsibility for this?
Well, I'm not really sure I can speak for them. I can say that we were partners this year in working together on the operation of the shelter. And I think it's probably, at least I feel it's a good way for us to, because we already provided a lot of support last year. It's just a good way for us to, collaborate with the shelter. But I'm just not sure if, I mean, Jim is here if you'd like
Sure.
to, if you'd like
Mr.
to talk to
LaGraff,
him.
would you like to come up?
So in our conversations, we did take on the operations of the shelter last year because at that point in time, the decision was there was no one who was going to be able to do the shelter, so we stepped in and ran the shelter. At that point in time, though, the discussion really among our board and with the other providers, Culpeper Human Services and some other groups, is we needed to find a more permanent solution to the warming shelter problem. And so the decision was made with the community group that's been working on it, was that Culpeper Human Services would take the lead in the shelter operations this year. As an organization, we are still very committed. We are providing space for the warming shelter to occur in. We are providing case management, who will do the intakes during the daytime hours of the program. We are offering financial support as well. We're providing meal support, but the day-to-day operations, because the homeless shelter is not something that would typically fall under the Community Service Board mantle, so to speak. So.
Well, and I would just add to that, when the committee was discussing this, the data that was collected last year showed that the majority of the folks that were being serviced were Culpeper County residents. And I think there were very few that came outside of the county to Culpeper. I can't remember the percentage.
There was a total of 77 people were served, 62 from a residential perspective, or guests as we would call them, an additional 15 who came in daily for some meals. Of those, about 50% were Culpeper County residents. The others who came through were really very sporadic, and actually I have the numbers, and I think I shared them with this board at the end of last year. But we saw like a lot of one-offs. One person from Prince William County, one person from South Carolina, stuff like that. So you saw a lot of individuals who were passing through, but the preponderance of people who did visit the shelter and who stayed at the shelter were Culpeper residents.
Well, still, I guess my question is, I mean, what are the reasons that you believe that Encompass, it doesn't fall under your purview?
So, I mean, I think we were created as an organization for behavioral health services and older adults services. We do housing supports from a long-term housing perspective. We have never been a homeless shelter organization for this region, and it's from a housing. We do case management. We do some of those other types of housing services, but we've never been, and it's never really fallen under the purview of our organization. We don't have, and one of the reasons that we talked about internally and really worked with the support of the community group to come up with a permanent solution is we don't have staff who are dedicated to the warming shelter. And this became last year an additional duty that our staff were able to step up in, but it really was unsustainable from their other duties that they provide to our organization to maintain it, which is the reason that I think the partnership with Lisa, the support with Culpeper Human Services as well.
So was that a board decision, a board vote?
It was our board decision, yes.
Okay.
Then I thought I would just take a minute to kind of share with you, because I know last year when we came and requested funding, we were talking about in terms of the future, what that is going to look like. And we have started conversations now looking forward to the 25-26 warming shelter, because it'll be here before we know it, just like it was this year. So part of the conversation that we're having is this will be the last year we'll be able to use St. Luke's as the location, and so we've spent 2 years looking at potential spaces for a warming shelter, and we just are not finding anything. So we've started some conversations with our ministerial association again, and I think that we may be able to work with them to go back to that Caritas model where the churches are taking turns and we're actually transporting folks from town out to that church for the church's week. The problem we're still going to have is labor, who's going to be there providing the oversight. So the churches would be there, but the overnight issue is always, the overnight stay is always an issue. So we thought if we start that conversation now and we start not only fundraising for this year, but looking towards next year and fundraising for next year, that we could hire staff that would actually go out to the churches and spend the night at the church. So I think we're probably going to go back to the model of rotating it between the churches. The issue again is going to be having sufficient supervision. It's not a one person stays there. You're going to have 2 to 3 people per shift available. And it may go back to people will be leaving the church at 7 o'clock in the morning and be back out on the street until 5 o'clock when it's time to go back in when it starts getting cold outside. So we're kind of open to all kinds of options, but we are already thinking about the next year.
Other questions?
Yeah, I have one question. I remember we were pretty much in the same situation when this was brought up last year about 50,000 raised, asking for us for 50,000 and needing 150,000. Since the town decided not to contribute anything, were you able to get to that 150,000, or were you still 50,000 short for last year?
No, I think that actually the funds were raised to reach the goal for last year. But it was in part because you guys did give a $50,000 donation last year, but there's a couple of additional grants that people have reached out to me about. So I feel like we'll be able to raise the funds because we were able to do it last year.
We had foundation supports last year too, that really helped out. Be able to cover all the gaps.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the board approves the requested $50,000 for the winter warming shelter. And I'd like to thank Encompass and Culpeper Human Services for, I think this is a phenomenal project. It's a 24/7 shelter, 3 meals a day, and case management. That's a huge win for the community. And if I remember reading correctly, Lisa, most of the people who stayed in the shelter last year, we were able to provide permanent housing for them when the warming shelter closed, correct?
I'm sorry I didn't start off with that because that was a huge, and
That's
actually I
hugely
think
important.
the majority of those folks that were moved to permanent housing, as far as I know, all but 3 of those folks are still in their permanent housing situation. And
that's
that was us working with landlords, and it would be Encompass, Human Services, and People Incorporated.
So that
And
I
Chaz,
think,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to leave
that's
him
okay.
out.
No, I think that demonstrates that this is much more than just a warming shelter. This also transitions people into permanent housing.
Yes.
So terrific work. Thank you.
Is there a second to the motion?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So we've had a problem, I guess it was 2 years ago, where it was delayed because of volunteers. We're not going to have that problem this year.
No, sir, we're scheduled, we're ready to roll.
I have one additional question. So with the town's new ordinances dealing with tenant homes and all those kind of things that increase the requirements of what they have to do, exterior, interior, whichever it is, are you guys seeing an additional influx of people being left out of their homes, either by rent increases that are no longer covered by the state, or they just are no longer able to afford, so they're becoming part of the homeless issue?
I'm gonna turn back here. I don't know that, okay. Yeah, they're both shaking their head, yes. So, I mean, those are the folks that are gonna know the answer to that question. They're both saying yes.
So we have seen an increase. So that goes to the point that the town really does need to contribute just as much because they're the ones putting ordinances in place that are pushing these people that we work so hard to get into permanent housing out because they're making it unattainable for their landlords to break even. Okay, thank you.
I'm going to support the motion with reservations. The reason that I'm cautious is this was a program that was started as a nonprofit volunteer organization. It is perhaps evolving into a program that is run by government-sponsored entities paid for by the government, and that concerns me, especially when we hear the concerns about occupancy and how things are evolving. So that said, I agree with Supervisor Lee that the program has done a good job of finding permanent housing, and that's a positive thing. So I'm in this year, and I'm not sure I'll be in next year. Thank you.
I'm going to support this motion, and I think the group last year did a great job providing shelter for the citizens that needed that and moving them into permanent housing. The other thing that I think is very important, work has already begun, and I'm not talking this week or last week, months before, for what we're going to do for the winter of 25-26. And that is the important part. The important part is what's happening right now. But it's also very good that we're putting plans in place to move this forward and to deal with it ongoing. So with that, if there is no other discussion, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried.
We do appreciate your support very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, the next item under new business, the board will consider approval of the award of a contract to Hawley Building Incorporated to replace the exterior doors at the courthouse. John or Paul, do you want to?
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to defer to Paul on this so he can provide the details of the contract.
Mr. Howard.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this contract is to replace all the exterior doors at the courthouse and to install some security film on a combination of exterior and interior windows down on the lower level to improve the security. The existing doors there were installed in the 1970s, and they're wood doors. These doors would be combinations of either steel doors or ballistic doors, depending upon the location in the courthouse. We coordinated the design and construction documents with the sheriff's office and the judicial staff to try to secure the building envelope. We did receive only one bid. We had 4 bidders at the pre-bid meeting, but only one submitted. And this total is $284,351. That is included in the. Pardon?
For doors?
Yes, for.
Okay.
It's 10 exterior door assemblies. And that would be to replace all 10 of those. They are custom doors based on the frame sizes and things that are in there, and they do have to match the exterior of the current doors to fulfill the ARB requirements, but they will be flat panel doors with moldings attached to them. But that's for 10 doors and ballistic windows in the J&DR court that has doors on the lower level where you can walk in and film on all the rooms.
Mr. Chairman, I never like to hear we only got one bid, so I'm not going to support this. I mean, it's like what we just went through with Parks and Rec on the pool. Mm-hmm. We got one bid, and it was overinflated quite considerably. So unless we have at least 2 or 3 bids, then I can't support it.
Other questions or concerns?
I agree with Supervisor Deal. I think we need to I mean, if we need more courthouse security or better doors, then great, let's figure it out. But perhaps let's see if we can find a way to do a process to come up with a couple of bids. I don't know what we did that led to just one, but when I look at the price per door, it reminds me when I was a kid of the $1,000 toilet, except we're really talking a lot more than that for a door now. This is real. So I appreciate work, but let's see if we can come up with a way to get at least a couple of bids.
Pardon?
Just one more.
Susan? There are other vendors that will build these doors. I understand that these are specialized custom doors, but are there other vendors out there available?
We reached out to vendors. They are a custom door based on the size and having to retrofit them into the existing frames that are there. They're expensive. There's a lot of them are double door assemblies. They're various different sizes, so they're all going to be custom. It's $28,000 for a door assembly for 2 doors is the average cost, I should say, plus the window film and the ballistic windows in the J&DR courtroom. So ballistic doors are not cheap. I mean, they are expensive. We can try to go out to bid again. We can certainly ask. It's a public bid. We advertised it on eVirginia. We solicited contractors. We called people, let them know. The things that they didn't want to get involved with were the headaches that go along with putting them in because they have to secure the building when they're doing the work. There's work restrictions on when they can do the work so they don't interrupt court functions depending on where they are around the building. And they're all custom, and their market right now, there was a lot of other work available, and some of the normal general contractors weren't interested in bidding on it. One contractor asked for a bid extension to try to get the pricing and stuff together for the custom doors. We provided that additional extension, and they said that wasn't long enough. They still could not get the pricing that they needed. So they did not submit a bid. So those were the 4. We had 4 that attended. One asked for an extension. We granted it, still did not submit, and we only got 1 bid.
The reason that they have to fit in the existing frame and you can't alter the frames?
The frames, the openings are different sizes on the building.
Yes.
And they're not a standard hollow metal frame going in there.
I get it.
So we have to make the doors to fit the opening because of the brickwork and everything around it. So there's a hodgepodge of doors. We have the old historic sections of the building, which are just not a normal size frame, so they have to be made. A couple of doors in the addition are a standard size. But that's the few. Most of the doors are in the old part of the building. We also have to do the doors on the front steps as you go up the courthouse. They're a very large, very odd-shaped door. And then we have to apply moldings to the outside of them to match the existing appearance of the courthouse. And that's all custom molding too, because that's not a standard molding either. So all those things add to the complexity and the cost. For a contractor.
I know a very good door builder. I'm going to see if I can get him.
Submit a bid.
Yes, because this is, I mean, he's redoing a house for me where the house is worth less than the doors that we're bidding for here. So, I know we need new doors, but maybe this is one where if we have a bidder that needed more time, we take a little bit more time and we see if we can get more bids and discuss this again in a couple of months.
Supervisor Lee, did you?
Just had a concern, but this is a fairly serious safety matter. I mean, we don't want to be waiting and come back here in 3 to 4 months with the same bid amount, correct?
Yes, it's a significant security risk right now to the courthouse. You could easily get into the building if you wanted to.
So my concern there is if we continue waiting.
We put those dumb cement things out front at several $100,000. You can't get in that with we keep throwing hundreds of $1,000s into that building.
That was for vehicles. This would be
Yes.
for people to just break a glass and get into the
Okay.
building through a wood door. It is a big concern for the judicial staff and the sheriff's office.
Any idea how much additional time the bidder that asked for time needed?
He asked for 2 weeks. We gave him a little more than 2 weeks. And then he came back on bid day and said he still couldn't get the pricing that he needed. So I don't know how much longer he would have needed.
Okay. Any further discussion? So I assume we are not going to have a motion here.
Maybe we should, because I agree with Supervisor Lee, we need some confirmed timeline. Yes, there is security risk, but we also need to see if we can do anything a little better for the taxpayers. So perhaps postponing the issue until our January meeting is what I would propose as a motion. So I don't want to kill it now because we need to do it, but let's set a firm timeline of a couple of months to see if we can do better. And if not, we need to do right by the courthouse. So I'll make a motion to postpone till our January meeting, consideration of this. Okay, well, do we have time to put it back out for bid by then?
I believe we had, under procurement rules, we would have to put it back out for bid if you're wanting to get other bidders. And
Okay.
I don't know whether this particular bidder that is the winning bidder at this point would be willing to do an extension at all. That would be something we'd have to talk to them about. And obviously they'd have to resubmit too because materials change, costs change, all those things. I don't know.
Get all that.
Mr. Culpeper's here. He might have an idea of what a likely time frame would be better.
Due to the complexity of the project, we would have to have a mandatory pre-bid meeting due to the restrictions of the courthouse. So I believe this bid went out it was close to 40 days when we went out to bid and final bid closing and then with the extension that was granted. So we're looking at least 40 days if we go out to bid today.
So you said some of the doors were in the newer section and those were standard sizes, but most of the doors were in the old section. Is there a way to split this into like 3 sections like we did with Parks and Rec to be like, hey, let's do a bid for the film, let's do a bid for the old doors that are all different sizes and do a bid for the ones that are standard? Or even have it 3 components within, or is there a way to split it up to help with that?
We could certainly split it up. I don't know if there would be an advantage to a contractor to do that.
Because you might get
It's-
more with the traditional size doors
Right.
since you can purchase them.
Well, the
easier.
contractor whoever bids a project is going to include the standard price for a standard door whenever they submit their bid. So you'll get 2 or 3 bids. You may end up with 2 or 3 contractors. If they've got to include their management, profit, and everything else, is can you attract a contractor big enough to do that work as well? That's the other challenge when you've got custom work is who's interested in a $100,000 contract versus a $300,000. You typically attract more bidders if you have a bigger project than you do with a smaller one, just because it's harder to manage.
But because there is a lot of work and it is more tedious for those bigger companies don't want to do it because it's not worth their time. They have plenty of other work.
Right.
Whereas you split it up, you might be able to get at least some of the portions a lot cheaper because you open it up to a bunch of smaller contractors that would be more willing to go after piecemeal the work instead of the whole thing. I don't know. It could.
Is there a possibility, we have another firm that wanted some more time. Can we reach out to them at this point and say, we're going to give you a month and allow this to stay open? That's not a legitimate way to do this?
No, that wouldn't be an ethical way to do that. The bid's already gone out. We would have to re-advertise.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Supervisor Lee?
Well, just to counter Supervisor Underwood's point, I think we should, I'd like to make a motion to approve the bid. It's preferable that we have more than one bid, but I think Mr. Howard has done a terrific job in the bidding process. It sounds to me like it's a specialty construction matter. And again, my biggest concern is security currently and in the near future.
think there's actually two motions
Well,
open then.
I can tell you.
Hold,
I
hold
can
on
tell
just,
you-
hold on just a second here. We've got two motions on the floor. So, I guess my question is there a second for Supervisor Underwood's motion?
Second.
Okay, we have a second on that. I think we need to further discuss and act on that motion. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay,
All right, so for discussion, appreciate Supervisor Lee's comments, but I will never support an appropriation to a project with only one bid. That's bad business. So I will never support that.
Mr. Chairman, I would just like to ask Supervisor Underwood, so waiting until the January meeting, what happens between now and then?
It sounds to me like we must reopen the process. And perhaps Supervisor Gugino's suggestion of splitting it should be considered, because standard doors, even though it makes two smaller projects, the standard doors hopefully are a lot less than $28,000 a door. And then for the non-standard doors, okay, we may have to pay $28,000, as crazy as that is, we may, but if that's for half the doors, okay. So staff would go figure out whether to do it as one or two, hopefully get more bids. And if we can do it by January, fine. If we need to wait till February or whenever, okay. So I'm all for safety and want it to occur. And I know we need doors. I agree with Supervisor Deal. We need to see if we can do a little better.
I mean, I agree. We're government, but we have to treat this like a business, like it's your own personal business as well. I mean, we look at it, we have a $235 million budget, and this is for $200,000. But we would not be representing our citizens if we, in my opinion, if we went forward and appropriate any money to a project with only one bid. That's just my personal opinion.
do you feel that January is a reasonable time frame to be able to come back with a bid?
When is your January meeting?
January 7th.
It's 60 days is doable, sure. We'll have to time the bidding to not conflict with holidays, but yes, we can get bids back by January.
Okay,
All right, in that case, I can support Supervisor Underwood's motion.
any,
Have one, there was no second and mine was on the floor.
Okay.
is there any further discussion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. I think you should probably stay right there.
Yes, sir.
The next item of business, the board will consider approval of the award of a contract to the Site Concepts Incorporated for construction of a shade sail to cover the porch of the Culpeper County Library. Mr. Howard.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, this project was proposed by the Library Foundation, library director, to install shade sails over the patio porch area on the side of the library. They like to use that area for events and fundraisers and meetings and other things, but it's very hot in the summer months because of the sun exposure on it. So they wanted to put up some shade sails to go over the library. We've included a contract in your package. This is writing a Sourcewell contract for Site Concepts to install those shade structures. They would cover the porch, and the total cost for the equipment plus installation is $120,549. That would be funded and paid for by the Library Foundation.
Any questions, discussion?
Yes, so paid for by the Library Foundation. Is this going to be an indirect pass-through of local tax dollars, or is this truly coming from donations and other sources?
Don't know.
It's a donation to the county from the Library Foundation.
Okay, so that's what I'm trying to get to. If this is not local tax dollars and we're just amending the budget, while I may question the need and price of a canopy, this is, if it's not local tax dollars, we have a library board, we have others that look at this, and if that's the way they want to go, then I am in favor of the motion.
I don't think,
There is no motion. Is that a
I'm in
motion?
favor of I'm in favor of what has been presented, and I make a motion that we amend the budget to approve the extra money for the Library Foundation.
second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Now, I would like to say that I served on the library board for quite a while, and Friends of the Library and the Library Foundation, they're great organizations, and appreciate what they do.
Any other discussion?
One thing, would you include in your motion to approve this contract, because it is a
And-
county building?
And
we
to
have
approve the contract, so,
Thank you.
yes, thank you.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we're going to move on to committee reports. Public Works Committee, Supervisor Underwood.
Yes, sir. Committee brings forward a motion that the board authorize advertisement of a public hearing to consider an increase in the tipping fee at the county solid waste transfer station. The proposed fee would increase by roughly 6% from $67.50 to $71.50 per ton.
Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion? No? Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Building and Grounds Committee, Supervisor Deal, could you give us a report?
Yes, the committee brings forward a motion that the board approve the plans for improvements to Mountain Run Lake Park, including the addition of new restroom facilities and parking.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. Rules Committee, Supervisor Gallino.
We did not meet.
Personnel Committee, Supervisor Underwood.
Yes, sir. We got a little bit of stuff going on here. Committee brings forward a motion that the board approve proposed updates to the Culpeper County Personnel Management Plan, and I don't know if we need brief description from anyone or not. That's our motion.
Is there a second? Second. We have a second, a motion and a second. Discussion? Conversation?
Mr. Chairman, if the board wants any kind of a summary, Amity is here and can provide it. It's up to you.
Would you like an explanation, or are you ready to vote?
Yes, we'll vote.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
All right, on to number 2. Committee brings forward a motion that the board approve a proposed new senior animal care technician position for the Animal Services Department.
We have a motion and a second. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried.
Next, and this one we do need. The committee brings forward a motion that the board authorize the building department to hire an additional plan reviewer position.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
And for this one, the committee did look for a little bit of adjustment to the position, so hopefully that's been done. But the committee brings forward a motion that the board approve a proposed new FOIA and Community Engagement Coordinator Officer position.
Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Oh, I had a discussion point.
Yeah, excuse me, I'm sorry. Got
We-
carried away.
This was initially part-time, but we discussed making this full-time. Is this now full-time?
Yes, sir.
It is.
Mr. Lou, we did adjust it per the committee's recommendations, and it's now a full-time position, focused not so much, well, still on FOIA, but very much also on the public information
Communication.
side.
Okay, terrific, thank you.
Yeah, great, thanks.
Further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion is passed. Public Safety Committee, Mr. Egerton, could you introduce this?
Yes, sir. This was an item that came out of public safety, which was not in the form of a motion. But what's been brought forward is a discussion of a draft ordinance that would address false alarms and impose a penalty for the habitual false alarms from any single business. There is a draft ordinance on board docs that the county attorney prepared. I guess what I would say about this at this point in time is it was an issue brought forward by our volunteer fire responders who get repeatedly called to businesses for false alarms, and it causes a great disruption at times. It's usually due to some type of automatic alarm that's malfunctioning. The one major problem we were having has currently been corrected, but the committee felt we should try to impose some kind of penalty for these types of habitual items. What I would say, though, is that the draft that's on board docs right now includes quite a bit of burden on our sheriff's office to enforce it. It would require businesses to register these alarms so that we know where they are, and then we'd be able to penalize them when the false alarms occur. I guess my thinking right now, and I welcome Sheila's thoughts as well, but this probably needs a little bit more work before you authorize it for a public hearing. Whether you want that to go to the Rules Committee perhaps might be the best place for it to go, but that's where I believe we are at this point.
What does the Public Safety Committee want it to go to the Rules Committee?
Well, they didn't discuss that specifically, Mr. Underwood, but they have had it for quite a while, and they only meet quarterly, and I think they'd like to move it along. So we won't be having a Rules Committee meeting this month, but perhaps we could put it on there next month.
I'm a little bit at a loss because I'd love to have a couple of other supervisors that are very close to this give me advice. And if we want to move it to rules, okay, but if we also just want to wait a month and hear from those that know the issue intimately, I'm happy to do that too.
We can certainly, work at it a little bit and bring it back to the full board next month if that's the desire.
I believe that this has been brought up to public safety several times. They meet quarterly. I believe moving this to rules would sort of give it some legs and get it
I make a
going in
motion, we
direction.
move this to rules.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion is carried. E911 Board, Supervisor Lee.
Mr. Chairman, the committee brings forward a motion that the Board of Supervisors authorize the award of a contract to update the recording software for phone and radio services at the Joint Dispatch Center. The cost is $157,248 to be split 1/3, 2/3 from the town and county E911 capital reserve funds.
Second, and just for clarification, that's 1/3 town, 2/3 county.
Correct.
Yes.
Ooh, did I say that incorrectly? Oh, okay.
We're good.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee, Supervisor Deal.
The committee is recommending to the Board of Supervisors that its bylaws be amended to add a designee from the town of Culpeper Parks and Recreation Commission as an ex officio member.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? We
Well,
did not
actually,
get a
the board-
second.
Technically, the committee was recommending something, not making a motion, so that's why I then made the motion.
Thank you. We're looking for a second.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on to Economic Development Report. Our Economic Development Director, Brian Rothamel, is here.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I have a short report for you today about one of our programs. I noticed in multiple places I desperately wanted today's meeting to be on November 5th. I know today is November 6th, so I don't know why I kept doing that. The strategic plan to develop a robust business assistance program is goal 2.2, and the advanced business participation with area resources. I want to talk to you about Facts and Snacks. This started July 2024. It is a free drop-in class for Culpeper business owners. The Small Business Development Center coordinates the facts. We coordinate the snacks. The class is typically 1 hour with a 30-minute pre-event networking. We're often finding that there's also a 30-minute post-event networking that the businesses partake in. And we host this at the Economic Development Center. We do record these and we later upload them to the website. The goal is not that these are hybrid. We do want these to be in person. We find that to be very important, especially for the networking aspect. But we don't want people to miss out on the information. So we provide it much later often so that people can view the information on the Be a Culpeper local website. Classes offered so far, we had SWAM certification and selling to the government in July, BIRS prepared in August, small business grants in September, and then last month we had a marketing one about how to become an in-demand brand. The class that's happening today, again, that's another part where I put November 5th, is I was trying to practice that before the meeting. Thank you. And that is for basic business class that's taught completely in Spanish happening right now at the EDC. We get ready for tax reporting in December. We have local resource panel in January. That will be a panel of resource providers throughout the community. So Chambers, CRI, my office, the tourism office will be included. SBDC will also be included in that in January. And then February, we have marketing. March, we'll have a hiring one and employment. And then access to funding and accounting will round out round out through May. We haven't planned June's yet. Everyone can register on beaculpeperlocal.com/events. That's all I have, I think.
Brian had a quick question. How many people do we have registered for the Spanish language basic guide?
Unfortunately, we only had one register on the website. It's happening right now. I know at least 2 people have showed up. I don't know if more are planning to come. That was the last.
I think in the
report.
future, if we just get the word out earlier on that, I think we'll get a tremendous response. I think that's a fantastic program. So, and thank you all for putting that into place.
And that's one of the things with this program, because it's new and still new that my office is doing so much in small business development. We're constantly trying to figure out the right avenues to go through to get people. The small business grant was our most popular one. Anytime you're talking about access to money, that typically gets a lot of people into the seats. But we're continually trying to figure out where that marketing should go.
Okay, good job.
Thank you, Brian. Any other questions? Thank you. Next item is our administrator's report. Mr. Eggertson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The agenda shows one item. I actually have 3 I'd like to touch on real quickly. The first is that our committee schedule is a little bit different this month. Committee meetings will be held November 19th rather than the 12th. The reason for that is several members of the board will be attending the VACO conference. So we have scheduled those for November 19th. And the current schedule right now is that Buildings and Grounds will meet a little earlier than usual at 8:30, and the Rules Committee at 9:30. And I just realized I misspoke earlier when we were talking about false alarms. The Rules Committee will meet this month. It's the Public Works Committee that won't meet this month. So we'll add that fire alarm issue to the Rules Committee as well. But again, 8:30 Buildings and Grounds, 9:30 Rules on November 19th. The second item that I didn't have listed that I just want to give a reminder is the legislative meeting with our three legislators, who all are confirmed to attend, is scheduled for 10 a.m. November 20th at CTEC. And I did leave a legislative agenda package from the Regional Commission at each of your places this morning. And then lastly, I just wanted to give the board a little bit of a heads up about an item that Mrs. Lamb and I will bring to the board at the December meeting, and that will be with regard to our ARPA funds, American Rescue Plan Act funds. Those are due to be fully encumbered by the end of this year. We have tagged them for various uses and did so quite some time ago, but simply tagging them is probably not going to be adequate. The only ones that are truly under any kind of contract are those with all points. So we will be coming to you with a proposal that right now looks like we will suggest spending the entirety of the ARPA funds on the last 3 months of payroll, and then we'll reallocate those funds to the previously tagged projects, and should be in about the same spot we are now. But we need to make sure that by the end of December, those funds have either truly been spent or they're truly under contract and encumbered.
Let's just make sure we're on legally sound ground, and that sounds great.
And we have been consulting with our auditors and others and feel like we're in good shape.
Great.
That's all I have. Thank you. Have a motion to go into closed session?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we enter into a closed session as permitted under VA Code Annexes Section 2.2-3711A, 3, 6, 7, 8, and 29 to discuss and consider: 1, the potential purchase of real properties located in the West Fairfax District, where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position, negotiating strategy, and financial interest of the Board County. 2, the potential award of a public contract involving the expenditure and/or the investment of public funds where competition or bargaining is involved, where if made publicly initially, the financial interest of the board/county would be adversely affected.
Second.
Need to vote on that? We're in closed session.
No, I think we need to.
Yeah,
We need to vote on that?
Yeah.
Okay, we have a
Sorry, I
motion and a
wasn't
second.
listening. I'm
All in
sorry.
favor? Aye. Closed? We're in closed session.
I apologize. I was already on to the next thing.
That's all
Sorry.
right.